7:27, we should be online. I can see a few people have joined. I can see Aaron, Roman. Give me a thumb up if you can hear me. Excellent. Nice to see you here. It's a bit early. Thanks, Aaron. Also, you can hear me and see me. That's very good. Lovely. Right. A couple of minutes. Let's give the rest of the people who signed up for this webinar some time, and we will see how it goes. In the meantime, I believe we are recording. Our recording has automatically started. There we go. We also have the AI note taker. Very good. And so hopefully we will get a good AI summary of what I'm going to show you today. This meeting is being recorded. That's very good. Lovely. Right, we'll give a couple of minutes. We started early anyway. All right. As usual, if you want to, if you have a question, just write in the chat. And as I go through my slides and through the demo, eventually I will see your slides, your comments, and so there will be time for a Q&A session at the end of this meeting. More people are coming. That's good. 1 minute before we start. Excellent. 6, 9 people. There we go. More will join. No problem. Excellent. It's very nice to see more people are coming. I think on LinkedIn it showed 220 attendees. Unfortunately, only has space for 100 people in this time in this meeting. Apparently, it's a setup. It's a configuration, but I don't expect all of them, all the people who signed up to join the meeting. But again, we should have a good 20, 15, 20, maybe more people. That's great. Excellent. I can see a lot of people are coming. We have 11 people online, more also added to the chat, which means that they accepted the meeting, but they're not online, which is okay because we are recording this session. And so people who signed up will receive the training, the video material later. Excellent. It's 7:30, 11, 12 people online. More are coming. Lovely. Very good. All right. So I think I'll give you like 30 seconds. I'll start sharing my screen and then we can start. So I'm going to look at the PowerPoint now, and hopefully, there we go. You should see the PowerPoint as I go through the slides. We'll start with, again, a brief introduction. More people are coming, which is always lovely. A brief introduction, and then we will go through an actual demo because I got my sandbox already set up. And so we can go through the demo. Okay, 1 minute past 7:30, 7:31. We have 15 people online. And if more people are joining later, they will join. We are recording, so we can get started. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for signing up for this live webinar. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alfredo. I am a Microsoft certified consultant and trainer. And today I'm going to go through effective data migration strategies in Dynamics 365 Business Central. I often deliver a training through my website or through LinkedIn. Today's the first Teams webinar because last year I did quite a lot of training events, but I used the LinkedIn Live platform. And it was working, but the quality of the video, the quality of the recording wasn't that good. And people told me that they struggled to find the material, the recorded online, even though it stays on LinkedIn. People told me that they couldn't really find it. And so I asked a couple of weeks ago, last month maybe, if you prefer the Teams meetings as opposed to LinkedIn Live, and vast majority of my followers on LinkedIn told me that they preferred Teams, and so here we are. Hopefully, the quality of the recording, the interactions, also the ability to share and ask questions here, it's a lot easier. So. Thanks for showing up. Let's get started. So as I said, effective data migration in Business Central. Today we're going to look at things that you must know about the Business Central's data model that will affect data migration, different methods to upload the master data to Business Central, because there are essentially a couple of options that are not very common, but again, you want to learn in case you can use them. And by the way, it's part of the MB 800, the official exam to obtain a certification. I mean, knowing the other methods, right? It's part of the exam. So if you're planning to take the exam and get certified, you want to know also the other tools. We're going to talk about how to manage open documents and transactional data. But it's going to be brief because there aren't many options I will show you in a moment, and then importing opening balances, common practices, and what to do and what to avoid. Right. So as I said, my name's Alfredo. My surname is pronounced Iorio, but you can ignore my surname. And everybody calls me Alfredo, which is perfectly fine. As I said, I'm a senior Microsoft Dynamics Business Central consultant, certified functional consultant. I also hold certifications in Azure, CRM, ERP, Finance and Operations, Power Platform, and I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer. So I often run courses and deliver training material, the official training material, to help consultants get certified. Today, we're going to talk about data migration in Business Central. The first topic of today's session is about understanding Business Central data model. What does it mean? What is Business Central data model? When we approach a data migration exercise for a new project, we need to understand that in Business Central, we have these let's say three main concepts: tables, pages, and lookup fields that really affect how we go through the data migration. Because the data model, so the arrangement of records, fields, and relationship between tables, pages, and other fields from other tables drives the effort. And so this is the first thing really that we're going to discuss today, the what. So what to migrate, the data that we migrate controls how. There's no one solution fits all in Business Central, and it's not just Business Central. CE, F&O, but also Oracle, SAP. Data migration strategies in business applications pretty much follow the same pattern. First, we understand what we need to migrate, and then we design how. Because again, we want to use a different approach. Even if we use the same tools, the configuration packages, we want to use a different approach. What does it mean in practical terms? Well, just to give you an overview, but if you are a consultant already working in Business Central, you should be familiar with these concepts. This is what we start with. We start with tables. Database tables, or Business Central tables, which are essentially database tables, store records. And so one record that we need to import belongs to one table. So one customer, it's one record on a customer table, one item table, one vendor, one generator code, and so on. One payment terms, right? We will talk about that. The tables often refer to entities that we know in Business Central, but these entities, the data, is displayed in pages, but one page is not a table. So a page in Business Central displays the records, but a page contains data from multiple tables. So the customer card, the customer list, displays records mainly from the customer table, but not only. And this is critical to understand. We will see how that affects the data migration in a moment. Then we need to understand what are lookup fields. So a lookup fields relates to this concept of pages displaying records from multiple tables. Lookup fields are fields on one table related to another, and the relationship between the two tables for the same field can vary. This is a very important concept. Doesn't really apply to a lot of data entities and tables in Business Central and Pages, but it is critical to understand that in some cases, the relation between a flow field, a lookup field of one item or the other, one table or the other, can vary. I will show you in a moment, as we go through the demo, how to control that relationship. You can change it before the data migration, as opposed to ignoring validation and trying to force the data through using a spreadsheet. So most fields, and this is the last, arguably one of the most important, most fields are system controlled and only controlled by the system. And they are not required in the data migration templates. I see this error all the time. A consultant creates a configuration package for customers, vendors, and items, share it with the customer, the client, or the data migration team, and the item card shows 160 fields. And 90% of these fields are unknown to the user because they are new to the system and they don't know about it. But again, trying to force system control fields in the data migration might result in a bigger problem, in another problem. So the what describes the how, right? What do we need to import describes how we do it. So don't try to push in the data migration template stuff that you don't need. So going back to the concept before, right? So data migration, the what describes the how. So data migration is tied really closely to the configuration. The configuration of the system is all those the details, the design specification, if you wish, that are listed, are documented after the requirements gathering. So you can see in this slide, it says derived from the requirement. So the customer requirement, the solution design, the modules in scope, the functionalities. Do we need warehouse shipment? Do we need bins? Do we need inventory items, right? Do we need responsibility centers? Do we need ship to addresses for customers? All these details are parts of the come from the requirement, therefore configuration, and therefore data migration configuration items. So you can see in this slide here, I'm using a DevOps page, and I use DevOps all the time at work, and it's a brilliant tool. If you're not using DevOps, you're really missing out because DevOps allows you to create pretty much what you see on this slide here. Data migration configuration items. So you don't have to use DevOps, but you can see in this slide here the arrangement. So I have a set of tasks, and I'm taking this from F&O, but the concept is, because I also work with some training for finance and operations, but the concept is the same. You can use it in Business Central. You can see here we have a feature 12 that says develop procurement policies, and under this feature, which is a requirement area, we have the parent and child, and all these accounts payable setup, accounts payable terms of delivery, for example, you can see here, these are all for finance operations, things that you will find in Business Central. For example, terms of delivery is the shipment method, right? Which is the Incoterms. You have the things, vendor groups, for example, it can be a dimension, right? Destination codes, distribution or destination codes are your locations, right? So if you want to use DevOps, and DevOps is a brilliant tool, but even if you don't want to use DevOps, the idea is that data migration entities in the work items should be separate. So we have the data migration configuration templates, posting groups, payment terms, and again, payment methods, delivery terms, shipping agents, and then you have the data migration. I will show you an example live in a moment. Once we have the data migration entities, like or work items, if you're using DevOps, you have the configuration data migration items, and then you have the specific data migration items for your clients. And then we understand master data and related data that we will see in a moment. So understanding the fields required for the master data templates And the related tables is essential for data migration. You can see here that this is a customer table, and you can see that there are the relation table ID and the relation table caption. So you cannot give this template to your customer client, enable all the fields, and expect them to go through an import without you taking care of the relation table ID. In some rare cases, you can enable auto create missing code, but there are downsides of doing that. So the idea is that once we understand the configuration, then the requirement, then we have the master data migration tables. Then we need to look at the relation tables related to these fields. So the city the field on a customer card is related to the postcode, and the document sending profile that determines if we send order confirmations via email or via EDI or e-documents, or we print a PDF, should be created and should exist before that. Now the ship to address, again, it's one of those which is a bit complicated because you cannot create a ship to address before you create a customer. So first you create a customer, then you create a ship to address, and then you go back to the customer card and you update it. Again, all these complex logics here, complex rules, which again can be very complex if you're getting started on a project for Business Central, these should really be determined before you create the configuration tables. And it is something that a senior consultant for a simple project can do just know what to do. It can be a simple spreadsheet, but for complex projects, DevOps is great because it keeps everything in one place. And if you have 2 or 3 consultants working on the same project, when you document everything and everything is in DevOps and not in spreadsheets, it makes a massive difference. So once we understand the related tables and lookup fields, it's important to understand that we don't need to include in the data migration templates fields that we don't need. And how do we know the fields that we don't need? Well, there are 2 types of fields that we don't need. The configuration fields that can be applied at configuration level, but other fields that are related to features that your customer, your clients will not use. And so it goes back to the point what I will repeat very often today. The what determines the how. What you must migrate determines how you migrate it. And so here you can see, this is a good example, right? You have a configuration package where the customer table shows 104 available fields. This is a Great Britain localization. The demo is going to be in a US localization. So depending on the localizations, the number of fields might vary. Also, if you have ISVs, applications, the number of fields also might increase. But here you can see a good example. You probably need less than half of the fields on master data, a bit more than half on other data here. General ledger account, probably you want like 70 or 80%. But again, it is extremely unlikely, I would say impossible, that you need all the fields in the configuration templates, mainly because even just 2 or 3 fields are system-driven fields. And you're not supposed to have it in the configuration template because you cannot force system-driven fields in the system. So take your time to understand what needs to be migrated, and maybe you want to create your templates based on that. So the next idea really is that, as I said before, users that are new to Business Central, your clients, right? Or maybe junior consultants that I just started working with consultants. Maybe they have a background in business. They are business analysts, right? Project managers. Users that are new to Business Central, particularly those who don't really understand the Business Central data model, do not have the necessary skills and knowledge to manage this complex ecosystem of related tables and flow fields during the data migration effort. So it's not the client's responsibility to manage their configuration packages. They just don't have the skills, right? So the consultants should prepare the data migration tables based on the configuration items identified during the workshops. It can be analysis workshops. Some Microsoft partners that work with complex projects like to have dedicated data migration workshops. That is entirely up to you. You decide how you strategize your effort, but you must be in a position where at the end of the analysis phase, before you start touching the system, before you start working on it, and before you give your clients, teams, data migration templates, you should know what needs to be pushed to the system and what should be avoided. That eventually might change, right? If the scope changes, but you should have a good starting point, which means you create we, right? Those who know about it. So the next part, the next concept I'm going to touch the next few minutes before we start working in Business Central is the different methods to upload the master data to Business Central and when to choose them. Again, the first two applications using extensions from other cloud apps and using the assisted setup, it is quite it's not very common, okay? But again, it's part of the exam, and so I felt obliged to show it to you because in some cases, for simple implementations, you might be happy with that because it might work for your client, and that is the case. You can use it. It's very quick, it's very easy, but it's very limited. So the first thing is the extensions by other cloud. So if your client is coming from QuickBooks, for example, here is an example. You have import from QuickBooks Online or from QuickBooks On-Prem. There are extensions in the app source you can install in Business Central that will allow you to get data from other cloud applications like Xero, for example. I'm not sure if there's one for Sage in the US localization, but I think I've seen something about Sage in this localization. Again, that works well if your client is already using these simple accounting tools. There are tools, extensions that allow you to migrate from Great Plains, and of course, developers and tech team know how to use development tools to upgrade an old version of Business Central on-prem to the cloud, but that requires some kind of development, right? So, but for simple accounting software, you might find an extension on the app source, and with a couple of clicks, you might have good data in Business Central. The other tool, which is really basic, really simple, and can only really work for customers with finance or implementation, for example, who are just getting started, is to use the data migration assisted setup. And you can see here on this slide, it allows you to download an Excel template, which is essentially a configuration package. You fill the template with your data. It's optional importer. You can use import settings, which is seen in a moment, based on configuration templates, which in the data migration assisted setup, it's very simple, but we can use it in the with the configuration packages, and that it becomes really very powerful. Again, very basic because it allows us to import customers, vendors, and items, maybe general ledgers, maybe, but that's it. So very limited. So the most advanced and comprehensive tool for data migration in Business Central is the configuration packages, combined with configuration templates and the configuration worksheet. And here you can see an example of a screenshot of something that I did recently for a client. I will show you a real example in my sandbox in a moment, right? Because again, there is a live demo in this call. It's not just me talking through a PowerPoint. So we will actually use it. Okay, I will show you how it works. So this is the most comprehensive and most advanced. It takes some time to set it up, but once it's set up, you can also create your own templates that you can reuse. It really works very well because it allows you to control and to monitor data migration efforts, to assign data migration to specific team of or people. It's a brilliant tool. So open documents and transactional data. Unfortunately, this session is going to be quite straightforward. Data migration tools are not designed to handle documents. Let me pause for a moment here. Let me just reiterate an important concept. Data migration tools in Business Central configuration packages, worksheet, and templates are not designed to handle documents. It doesn't mean that they cannot handle documents. Okay, you can, but the tools again are not designed to do so, which means that there is a high risk of getting bad data in a live system and compromise the data. So I will show you in a moment why, but this is really in general terms, open documents, sales orders, purchase orders, transfer orders, assembly orders, production orders, if they're just open documents, you might find a way to use configuration packages, but really that's not their purpose. And what about transactional data? Again, there is no out-of-the-box option to import transactional data. There are only workarounds. And when I say out-of-the-box options, because through development, you can pretty much write entries in a ledger. Some people use budgets. Other people use data migration tools and SQL injection and a lot of different tools. Also, there's a company in Eastern Europe that have developed their own applications. They can upload transactional data and all data in Business Central. So there are no out-of-the-box options. You must use extensions. You must use developments. If you don't want to use it, you can have only workarounds. Some workarounds are better than others, but again, it only depends project by project. As a default option, my recommendation would be no option to import transactional data. There are better tools, better ways to manage data from in an old database and a new database, which again, it's not part of data migration because again, as I said, and I repeat myself, no out-of-the-box options, only workarounds. So use development or use a workaround, which comes with obvious limitations, right? So why data migration tools are not designed to handle documents is just the nature of the data in your system, right? Your system, in our system, the system that we use every day at work. Configuration packages, again, can use for open documents, but here you can see an example of a package that I have used for a client. You can see how the sales header and the sales lines are related. And even though you might argue, well, Business Central knows that the sales line is related to the sales header, through the specific link ID, right? You need to confirm the parent ID in the configuration package if you want to ensure the data doesn't go through in the wrong way, because you might end up with a sales line or sales lines to the wrong sales header, or even sales lines with no sales header. And the funny thing that Business Central does is the first sales order with the first with the lowest, let's say, document number will include all the lines for all the documents. I've actually seen it in a live environment, right? And so it's not nice, right, to see one order with all the lines for the different orders. So the parent ID, the number of available fields, and then I can show you here in the next slides. There is a very high risk of pushing bad data into the database because the validation of fields and the auto update of document lines, when you add your document lines by keying in essentially lines in through the user interface in Business Central, all that kind of validation and rules that updated documents don't exist when we push data using a configuration package. So I might end up creating a sales line for items with the unit cost is 0, even though the unit cost of the item is actually unit cost, right? I might end up creating a sales line with the unit of measure that doesn't exist. And I've seen funny things really when users try to push data with the configuration package. So the increase is even higher if the sales and purchase documents includes inventory items and locations. There is all sorts of validation that happen in the system for item ledger entries, value entries, remaining quantities, unit of measure conversion. It can really get complicated. Again, I'm not saying that it's not possible. I'm saying it's very risky. So these are the common things to look at. First, you need to use the parent table ID for document lines. Even though, as I said before, this logic already exists in the system, you must ensure that on the purchase line table, number 39, you include a parent table ID 38, which gives the configuration package that logic that already exists in the system to link the two. So the next thing you want to do is to limit the number of fields per table. You can see number of available fields here on the sales set that is 186. I only included 13. But again, I can only use 12 because I need to skip validation on some fields. Skip validation on some fields is essential to push data in the system. But again, if you skip validation and you make an error in your spreadsheet, the risk is that you get bad data. Again, it's not recommended for production data. If you want to use it in a sandbox, to try that out and to give your client's team a few orders they can use for user test, UAT, user acceptance testing, but it all means to do it. But again, it's not really recommended to do it in production, right? So last concept before we jump into a live demo, importing opening balances. We only really need to take care of these 5 scenarios here. And this is what Business Central is designed to do so. So again, what determines the how, right? We determine what kind of opening balances we need to import. So the general ledger is arguably the first most important, and it can never really, it can never be skipped, right? When you do an import and opening balances. Then we have the sales ledger, which is about the sales transactions that are open, but needs to be reconciled. We have the purchase ledger, and then we have bank balances. If your clients, of course, use balances. Last but not least, inventory and warehouse, arguably the most complex, where lots of mistakes can be made, unfortunately. So there are 2 rules about the opening balances, because the 2 should be split and we should use 2 different methods. So the first thing is that general ledger balances, sales ledgers, purchase ledgers, and bank ledger entries must be imported with a general journal. And my preferred way of working is to create a separate journal batches for each import, so you keep things separate. So each you can see here I have general journal batches for each of these scenarios. The exception here is that for inventory items, you cannot use a general journal. You need to use a dedicated item journal. Here, things get a bit more complicated because you can enable item tracking now, probably was last year or a couple of years ago, when Microsoft introduced item tracking on lines. Before that, we used to have the item journal and then the item tracking details to update the journal lines, which was very cumbersome. So now you can enable item tracking online. So if your client needs to migrate items with lot number, serial number, or package tracking, you can enable it on their lines. And this is how your item journal for opening balances should look like. This is my preferred way of working. It saves me a lot of headaches. So you can see the characteristics of this inventory opening balance here. I use a dedicated general business posting group with a suspense account. You can see here my general business posting group, WHSE, stands for warehouse, because in this case, I'm going to use a location with warehouse management. I have pin codes and I also have a package tracking, which defines containers. And so in my general business posting group warehouse, and the combination between this posting group and the item posting group, I use a suspense account. I did another workshop last year about opening balances and suspense account. It's more about finance and accounting. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this, but the important bit here is that you should try to avoid posting debit and credit entries to the same inventory account, because if you do that, you break the link between value entries and general ledgers, and your inventory, your client's inventory, we hardly ever reconcile. But again, more about suspense accounts on another session. Location and bin codes will create the warehouse entries that you need if you are uploading inventory in a warehouse location or in multiple warehouse locations. You can enable direct put away and pick after posting a journal. There's no need to do a warehouse item journal or a physical inventory journal. Physical inventory journal can also work, but again, an item journal allows you to have the item tracking on the lines. And important, the unit cost on the item and the quantity, if you want to double check or triple check that what you're posting, your client is posting is correct, it's very simple. The unit cost times the quantity, if you're using the base unit of measure. If you have advanced warehouse, you want to use an alternative, you could use an alternative unit of measure, but in this case, it's the base unit of measure. Unit cost times quantity is equal to the amount that your client must reconcile in their balance sheet. And so by doing a preview posting and checking your general ledger entries, you will find out whether the amount you're posting is correct. Again, if you do the ins and outs in the same ledger, you end up with zero, and you will never know if you posted a journal that doesn't reconcile. And so your clients will go live, and as they need to go through the first month end, they will be in trouble because they're trying to reconcile the inventory. The numbers will not match. There's no way to find out what went wrong. Right, 42 minutes of me talking through a PowerPoint that doesn't really look very nice. I apologize, I got no PowerPoint skills. All my PowerPoint decks look very simple and basic. I just don't have the skills to make something that looks pretty, unfortunately. So that's it. My specialization is business applications. It's not PowerPoint. So hopefully you didn't mind. So it's time to move and start sharing my sandbox. And we will go through a live demo. Excellent. So as I go through the live demo, feel free to post your questions in the chat, and it's going to be a quick one. And after that, we can go through your questions if you have any questions. So the first thing that I wanted to show you is the data migration items in Azure DevOps, because in the beginning I said, well, DevOps is great for configuration work items, and this is an example. Of a just test data that I use in my DevOps sandbox that I used again for training purposes. I'm also planning to create a course about Azure DevOps, but again, just test data. So the good thing about data migration work items and to plan your data migration efforts is that if you use Azure DevOps, you can actually structure your data migration tasks, and I use tasks, but each organization will have the work item type arranged in a different way, and you can use it and arrange it under specific features. So here we have an example. We have a source to pay, which is part of F&O, part of the as epics included in the source to pay are also available in Business Central. Here we can see procurement catalogs as a feature, and under each feature we have the user story, which are specific requirements, right? And so if I go through the developed procurement policies that in an F&O terminology, we're trying to apply to Business Central, determines pretty much how we purchase stock. You can see we have things like determine advanced ship notification. This is a requirement gathering, right? If the client needs advanced ship notification, this user story will be in scope, right? Time on delivery policies. lead time, right? Shipment methods in Business Central. Again, this is for finance and operations, supply chain management, but the concepts are very similar. And so under this specific requirement, under the feature, you can see I can expand. I see the specific, again, requirements for from the client. And then I have my tasks that are pretty much my data migration and configuration items. So line of business, you can see a description here. This comes from the Microsoft Business Process Catalog. Again, it's mostly for finance and operation and CE, but it works very well for Business Central too. And so a line of business in F&O would be a responsibility center in Business Central, right? And so responsibility center, configuration of work items, terms of delivery will be shipment methods, right? Conditional items for transfer, the seller to the buyer. It's your Incoterms, right? Which in Business Central are transport method. Here we have reason codes. Here we have grouping vendors. I want to show you the last one, which I found really interesting. You can see rebate groups, for example, right? Again, line of businesses, which again, it can be a dimension, right? It can be purchasing policies. So all things that you can use to define, right? To define your data migration policies. Again, this is a lot to take on because it's mainly for F&O. You can see sales prices and discounts. But again, if you manage to get that in DevOps for Business Central and you have a good description, you can see some of the items also come with specific descriptions. Again, it's all from the Business Process Catalog. So the goal here is to segregate the data migration items between configuration and master data, and then we can work and we can start working on it, right? So the next thing that I wanted to show you is it's an example of the related fields that I told you before. Let's start with a configuration package, and you can see I will show you an example. Let me create a new one, and this is just a test one. Okay, so I'm going to exclude the configuration table. You might be familiar with this concept. Look, if I click on customer, actually, no, I don't want customer, I want the item. Okay. Now I get this message, right? I say some fields have 2 or more rated tables. Do you want to check them? So here, I see the rated table. These are not all the fields, flow fields with related table in Business Central. These are, in this case, it's only one field. This is one field on the item card, which has a relation to a table. In this case, it's a put away unit of measure. And by default, it looks at the unit of measure table. But the point of this message is that the relation to this field can be for more than one table. Remember what I said, the relation table can vary. And this is an example. So if I'm working with advanced warehouse and I want my base unit of measure to be one base unit of measure, right? Pieces, and I want my alternative unit of measure to be the put away unit of measure in pallets, then it's by clicking on change relation table. Now Business Central tells me, but you know what? I don't want for this configuration package, right? We're not changing the data model in Business Central, right? But that, of course, should be obvious. For this configuration package only, I want the put away unit of measure field not to point to unit of measure, which is the base anyway. I want to point to the item unit of measure, which is an alternative unit of measure. And once I click yes, now I change the relation of that table. And so if I go back now and I check up my item and I try to find the put away unit of measure, now you can see it has changed. And so another important, let's say rather critical, let's say, use case for this one, it's the purchase price list, sales price list. If I click enter and say, well, check the fields, and now we have product number, assigned number, and unit of measure. So in this product number, by default, the purchase price list is really the product number field, or my purchase price list, is looking at the item table. But if I click here, look at how many options I got. I got the general ledger. If I want to use a purchase price list for general ledger codes, non-inventory, I can use resources, resource groups, item groups. So if I now know that my client was going to purchase resources, right, I can change it. And look, assign to vendor or maybe project. I want to create a purchase price list, right? Sorry, a project price list. But there we go. Now my assigned to number of my purchase price list is pointing at a vendor because we're purchasing from the vendor, right? But we are purchasing a resource. Again, I'm just using different examples, but you can see how the related table is critical. Now, when I run the validation, I got 0 chances of pushing bad data in my system because Business Central is doing the validation for me. And if I need to create a purchase price list for a resource, now I got it, right? If I need to create it for the general ledger account, now this is what I'm going to choose, right? So again, as I said before, requirement gathering, configuration, fit gap analysis, configuration package, because data migration depends on the configuration, which depends on the requirement gathering, right? So now that we have identified the DevOps items and related tables, let me show you how to work with packages and using multiple packages for multiple tables when we really want to push it the complexity to the next level. Here you can see I have a master data template. I have sales and receivable, but I use 2 sales and receivable, one for EU, one for foreign. I will show you that in a moment. So the master data package includes the basic data, right? General ledger accounts, for the chart of accounts, customers, vendors, and items. But I want to show you what's in here. Note how you can notice how even though these tables are big tables, it contains a lot of data, I only included a few, only the essentials. And you can see in this case for general ledger account, I got name, number, account type, category, and whether it's an income or balance sheet. You may argue, well, by the way, we need more, right? Who can go live with this data? On the customer card, name, number, address, and credit limit. Of course, your clients and my clients will need more data, but that's not the point. The point is the additional data will be in another package. And this will allow me to split the work between different users and reduce the errors because these packages are all faster to load. I only need to validate a few. So I also have the sales and receivable EU, and now I have my customer again, but I have my customer with a data template that includes the configuration work items. So let me configuration data points. If I check a configuration template header, look, you can see here that this configuration template includes all the additional fields that I need to transact. Again, your clients will need probably more than that. But again, this is something you derive from the data, from the fit gap analysis and the requirements. And so by using a configuration template with mandatory fields and default values, right? I probably need to, update, this field is mandatory, and then once I got this fields mandatory, the default values will allow me to will allow Business Central essentially to automatically populate these fields. And here in the customer table, again, now I have different fields. The ship to, credit limit, shipping method, and shipping agent. And so why we do this? We have the same idea here on customer forum when we have a data template, rest of the world. This arrangement of multiple configuration packages allow me to essentially reduce errors and automate the population of fields that do not depend on the data migration on the client spreadsheet, depend on the configuration items and the configuration data and setup that I created here. And this is the config data. I like to call it 00 so it stays on top with all the postcodes, business posting groups and posting setup and so on. So you might argue, well, now we got lots of configuration packages. We need to switch between all these multiple packages. It's going to be very confusing. Well, that's why we use the configuration worksheet. And now in the configuration worksheet, you can see I also misspelled configuration here. So I'm going to fix it. There we go. Here, now I can work on multiple tables more than once. You can see I have this area configuration. I have the group, general ledger, I have master data. And so in my general ledger, I have the tables that I have included in the package code configuration. And I also have the opportunity to assign it to me, right? So I am the lead consultant and I am responsible for that. I can manage the, say this is in progress, this is completed. And so I know exactly what I need to look at. And I also have the nice, fact box that tells me the data and the rated tables, whether they're enabled or not, and the database records already here. So I click here, there we go. This is my payment method. So very quick and easy way to manage everything. But the good thing about the configuration worksheet is that now I have my customer twice, something that you cannot do in a configuration package, because if I try to add a customer twice, it will give me an error. The point is that now I have the master data customer and I'm using the master data configuration package, right? And the configuration master data on customer allows me essentially to look at the package card, and this is essentially what I did before. So what I'm going to do now from here, I can export this one to a template. And now I'm using an Excel template from the configuration package. It's the same, but I'm working in a configuration worksheet. So I did something before this meeting. So I'm going to import from a template. I'm going to choose a configuration. There we go, a customer here that I created before. And so you can see that I have three master data templates that I created. So I'm going to import, it's going to validate vendor and items, and then I'm going to apply the package. And you can see I'm applying the master data package. With this application now, 7 records have been inserted and all the records have been modified. The records that I have just inserted, I can actually see here. You can see I have created Microsoft, Oracle, and SAP, IBM, and all these customers. I just give them random numbers. And if I click on it, you can see I have the address, Reading, Business 1 Street, Watson Road, but there's nothing here. But again, it took a fraction of a second to import a template because, again, it doesn't contain many data. I have the master data templates now, customers. And now what I can do is look at customer EU and customer foreign. And this is something I can do, but you know what? I can actually tell that, you know what? I want to give customer foreign to a colleague of mine. Well, I take care of the customer EU. And now customer EU use a different configuration package that includes a configuration template with EU customers. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to export to the template, and this time is going to export the template from this package. So once I'm done with the fields that are included here, I'm going to again import, right? I want to, sorry, not export, I want to import again, import for templates. And now I'm going to choose custom rest of the world, where I added most of like ship to code. I added the ship method. I added the shipping agent code to SAP and IBM. And it tells me that my package contains data. I want to import it. And now I'm going to apply it. And now you can see 5 records modified. And by using this method, when I create records with one package and I modify records with another package, right? I can segregate and separate my data migration efforts, and I can assign roles and responsibilities without having to process bulk uploads with 50 fields for each table, 500 records at a time, and one record goes wrong, and 500 customers end up with the wrong posting group, and we need to start from scratch, which is a nightmare, right? So now, customer EU, you can see the number of fields included, the credit limit, the shipment method, so logistic stuff, and database records 16. And now you can see that my, let's say, my Microsoft, credit limit has been applied here. Microsoft was not the rest of the world, right? There we go. SAP now has been updated, and it's been updated with the posting setup that created by not by my configuration template. Sorry, not by my configuration package Excel spreadsheet, but it was created by the configuration template. I only added in my spreadsheet the shipping agent and the shipping method. So someone in logistics now is responsible for this data. And by using the configuration templates, I also managed to update my customer cards with the invoicing details. You can see all the details here that I applied. And so now the next user can pick up customer EU, and then I can do the same, right? I can do item master data, and then I can do item finished goods, item raw materials, right? Item resales, resale, for example. And again, the limit is really about your customer's requirements, right? But using this way of working, you can see I also have the opportunity to say, but you know what? This one, it's done. All the customers of the rest of the world is done. And then there we go. Once this one is done, you can see copy is also available. It's a license table. Copy available means that I can use this one. I can copy this data straight into a new company. But again, intercompany, multiple companies, data migration is something maybe for another workshop because it adds more complexity, right? So you can see how we started with a configuration package, multiple configuration packagings, related fields, and how we changed the related fields, and we ended up with a rather complex configuration worksheet with the same table on multiple rows that looks at use different packages. There we go. Here you can see a lot better, right? And we segregated customers master data, customer EU, customer foreign. The same applies to everything else. Right, so this pretty much concludes the demo for today, and we've been live for an hour, but we still got 6 minutes. If you have any question, I can see in the chat, meeting being recorded. Perfect. So if you want to share any question, Febby, clapping hands. Thank you very much, Febby. I really appreciate your feedback. And again, my recommendation, if you don't have any question for me, is that try it out. See if that is something that you and your team can use. I don't see that happening in many organizations because organizations tend to recreate the configuration packages as they start every project. But the good thing about this methodology is that the configuration package in itself, the configuration worksheet and the packages and the allowed fields, included fields, can all be included in a dedicated package itself. So you can create a package that includes multiple packages, which means you can create your packages in a sandbox, export it, keep it in a SharePoint, reuse it as you start a new project. And if you are a Microsoft partner and you have lots of projects, chances are you pretty much work on similar projects, right? You either work on mostly on finance projects, or maybe you specialize in manufacturing. So most of your clients have manufacturing items. So work centers, different business, different product posting groups, work centers, machine centers, bill of material, right? So you create templates for these data migration tools, right? The data migration scenario, so to speak. You can tweak them, when you need them, right? And once you have tweaked your configuration packages, essentially, you can just upload the package into your client's sandbox. You want to do a few adjustments. You want to look at, assigning roles and responsibilities, right? And then you're good to go. Final recommendation: if you really need to push the data migration to the limit, let's say because your client says, I need to go live, by the time we go live, we will have 500 open orders and 600 production orders ready to start. Configuration packages, as I said, are not designed for open orders. And even so, when the open orders are a lot, the risk of getting the wrong data in the system is too high. If you work with a developer, ask the developer to create a custom import that will validate all the headers and all the lines as it updates the data. Because again, the configuration worksheet, the configuration packages skips the validation, skips the rules on order headers and order lines. You might end up with lots of errors. It's easy for a developer to create an import tool that will allow you to import hundreds of documents and thousands of lines in one go, ensuring that the validation happens in the system so you don't end up creating mistakes. Maybe 2 or 3 days of development. A good developer can actually do the job relatively quickly. It is definitely worth the investment because you will eliminate the risk of pushing bad data into a live system. And trust me, configuration packages can push bad data in a system. It happened to me, unfortunately, many times. We have to use custom development to apply a data fix after go live, which is never nice, and it doesn't really look good for your customer. So that's my recommendation. All right, so it's 8:29. It's 1 minute before we stop. We end up with 30 or 31 people on the call. It's probably the most the highest number of people in one call. Lawrence, you have a question? You can unmute yourself. Allow me. Yeah, there we go. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Yeah, thank you, Alfredo. Are you able to hear me? Hello?
So, yes, we can hear you. Thank you. What's your question?
Yes, I wanted just to confirm, for my own understanding, whether this kind of method helps me deal with validation errors. Usually when you're importing large chunks of data, sometimes you end up failing to take all the data at once just because you have a simple error in let's say one record. Yeah, so I'm just wondering if I decided to go with such a method, because personally I haven't I really appreciated the configuration worksheets. So I've been using configuration packages only. So I'm just wondering whether it can help me deal with such, because it's usually it gives me a bad ending when it stops to, it stops the entire import process just because I have a small error in one record or two.
Yes, absolutely, Lawrence. Look, it's very common what you said. And when you use one configuration package, unfortunately, that's the only way. You got one error, one field, one record, and then you end up with everything fails. So in the configuration worksheet, you can see you have the package table fact box. I believe I'm still sharing, right? So you can still see my screen. As I try to push a record in it, and I see the package error, here I can click on this number. And here I can filter by, the invalid records. I can always delete the invalid record or fix the record here, because this one is let me see if I can import from a table. Let me show you a good example, a real example. So let's say I import a table, right? And now I have used a customer foreign on one table here. So if I have any error, it will show in the package record, right? And so maybe I should try to apply the package and see if I can get an error. My data it's accurate, so I cannot trigger an error now. But essentially, if I ended up with an error, I will end up having the error here. And so I click here, I can look at the error, I can actually key in, you can see, fix the ship to code here, for example. And then I can just click on apply. I can fix the error on the fly and apply the data from the configuration package. You can do that from the configuration package too. But the configuration worksheet, I prefer the configuration worksheet because again, it gives me a better overview, right? But that is something that I would do, right? You can do with using configuration worksheet.
Thank you, Alfredo. That is really insightful. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Lawrence. Absolutely, excellent. Lovely. So, any other question? If you have any question, raise your hand, and I will unmute you because apparently I need to click on, allow microphone. Something that probably a setup on this session. Julius, let me allow mic.
Hi,
Hello,
Alfredo.
Julius.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Julius. How are you?
Hey, great. Doing well. Thanks for the great session. I actually posted in the chat already. It was very exciting, interesting to see the Microsoft Business Process Catalog, the structure in Azure DevOps.
Yeah.
I didn't clearly or fully understand the connection now between the Business Process Catalog in Azure DevOps and the configuration package or configuration worksheet. Is there some mechanism or linkage between the two of them?
Your question is an excellent question. It was going to be my next point, in fact, but I ran out of time, so I didn't have the time to explain it. So great question, and thanks for asking. So first one, there is no real link between the configuration, the business process catalog and the configuration worksheet and template. But the good thing is that at the moment, I believe Microsoft is working on it, and so if you use the configuration template, let me start away. If you use the business process catalog as it is, you will have all the configuration templates, work items as tasks, but they all refer to F&O and CE, finance operation, customer engagement. You need to tweak them to make sure that they apply to Business Central. It's a nice project that I wanted to start working on, and maybe eventually, very soon I will start working on it because it's really important. So at the moment you upload, the way it works like this. You find the configuration. Let me see if I can jump here. So you download the business process catalog from GitHub, and then you click on import work items. And here you need to choose the CSV file, and you can see if you click here, it says import and export bulk work items with CSV in Azure boards. It still requires some data manipulation, but not much. And the CSV, it's already available from Microsoft, the Business Process Catalog. Again, it's all based on F&O and CE. Only a small number of work items of these big applications apply to Business Central. You cleanse it a bit, you delete items you don't need, you import it. Once it's imported, you will have the work items type created as tasks. And so everything which is a task, it's essentially set up in configuration and data migration. You can see cash discount. Set up is configuration, configure it and set up. Netting rules, you can see purchase bills. It's all stuff that you are to invoice matching, the setup, right? It's all about tasks. If I click on it, again, this is all included. I didn't create any of this, right? It's all included in the business product catalog. Look, for each work item, you also have a description. You see the invoice totals, the legal entity, matching details, accounts payables parameter. So, invoice matching setup in F&O is something you can define. And most of the times, the work items also include links to the Microsoft design details that you're looking at. So it's very powerful. Unfortunately, there's no quick way to turn these into a configuration package or configuration package lines. But what will be a very good project? A Power Automate, right? The flow that takes work items from DevOps and using Microsoft Graph and Microsoft API creates and updated configuration packages in Business Central. So you have one client project, right? You have the DevOps work items refined after the explore phase. And once you're ready to create your configuration in Business Central, you run the Power Automate workflow, and boom, in Business Central, you got all your configuration items. It's a beautiful project I would love to work with on. And maybe, Julius, you and I can actually work on that if you want to, right? What do you think? Right?
Invitation.
But think about it, it's going to be great, really, right? If you can actually do it. At the moment, it doesn't exist. Again, it would be nice to have that. Right?
Did you already tweak that template to Business Central, the F&O template?
I did it for a couple of live projects. I never, managed to get those for a couple of clients. Actually, I never managed to get those in a generic format for Business Central, but it's something I will start working with very soon.
Mm-hmm. Very exciting, yeah. Thanks so much. Mm-hmm.
It's very exciting, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, excellent. No problem at all, Julius. Anytime. Lovely. Okay. So it's 8:38. We got the recording and a couple of questions. Let me see in the chat if you have any question. We should be, Julius. There we go. Yeah, excellent. Thanks for the organization. Very good. Phil, thanks for the organization. Lovely. Well, thanks for your lovely feedback. I really appreciate it, and we can stop sharing. As you know, we have recorded. I have recorded the session. The session is now saved. And so what I'm going to do now, you will likely receive a link where you can access to it. I'm not quite sure how Microsoft Teams recording work. But again, if it doesn't really work for you, what I'm going to do, I'm going to double check that we can have access to it. If not, I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it in a dedicated SharePoint. And I will make it available for all of you so you can rewatch it or you can download it and you can use it for work when you want it. Thanks again for attending. It was a pleasure to work with you. Next month, I'm going to run another training workshop on a topic that I'm going to, we can agree together. And maybe you can send me, or you can find me on LinkedIn. You can send me a message. You can write on this chat if you have an idea or any suggestion for the next workshop, because I plan to have one hour session a month about Business Central for the next few weeks to cover important topics that you might want. Again, as usual, it's all available. It's all for free, and I welcome your feedback. Okay. Excellent. If there are no other questions, thanks everybody. I'm going to close the meeting here. Lovely to find you here online, some new friends and some old friends and colleagues. And I will see you all in the next session. Have a good rest of the evening. Thank you.